Hi, alchemists. Welcome back to another episode of Elemental Educator. Be sure to like and subscribe on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you get your podcast from. Today, episode 14. Before we get started with today's episode, I want to introduce our incredible guest, Jethro Jones. Jethro's path in education is deeply inspiring, shaped by personal experiences and a drive to revolutionize how we approach learning. From his leadership roles to his innovative methods for personalizing education, Jethro offers a wealth of insights. Get ready for thought-provoking conversation that challenges traditional education norms. Now, let's dive into the episode and let the alchemy of education ignite your passion for learning.
This is the Elemental Educator, the podcast where we kindle the fires of dialogue with the alchemists of education. We're here to embark on a journey where ancient wisdom meets the contemporary world of education. On Elemental Educator, we dive into the deep waters of adaptability, feel the grounding earth of core values, ride the swift winds of change, and ignite the fiery spirit of risk-taking. Fire, earth, wind, water. This is the Elemental Educator, and now your host, Tyler Comeau.
So I want to start off by getting to know you a little bit more. And we know about the Transformative Principal and the podcast and the other podcasts that you have going, but I really want to hear your story, and I want to hear, how did you get to where you are now?
This all goes back to when my oldest daughter was born, and my wife and I, when my wife was pregnant, both my wife and I knew that there was something not right. And we were too young and too scared to tell each other that we were feeling that way. And so when my daughter was born and the doctor said there's something wrong, I was like, just tell me what it is, because if I know what it is, then I'll be all right. And she said, we think your daughter has Down syndrome. And I was like, oh, I can live with that. No big deal. And the powerful thing that happened then was that all my expectations about learning, growth, and development were just destroyed, because as soon as she said that, I knew that my daughter was not going to have the same life as any other typical kid. She certainly wasn't going to have the same life as me. And why this is so important to my story is that I recognized that every single kid has their own unique life and their own unique path. In school, we think that learning is this straight line, and that couldn't be farther from the truth. I wrote a blog post about it that I'll give you the link to, and there's a picture in there. And I wrote this because a lot of people were talking about learning loss during the pandemic. That is a lie. Learning loss does not exist, because it is impossible for someone to lose learning in their path. It is possible for them to not meet our expectations, to not be where we feel like they should be, but that's a different conversation than somebody learning loss, or losing learning, I should say. And so I knew that my daughter's life was going to be different, and I knew that every single kid has their own path that they have to go down. And that's what we need to safeguard and protect, is their own learning path. That is so fundamentally important to me.
That is so powerful and a very bold statement, because you're right. We talk about learning loss all the time, but I think really what we're trying to say is our expectation for a year's worth of growth, given that year's worth of input, we're not meeting expectations that we met before and how much we're expecting people to grow. It doesn't mean we're losing things. It just means we're not growing as fast as we used to grow.
And who says that the amount we were growing before was the right amount? And who says that amount is right for this particular kid? And here's the amazing thing. Before the pandemic even happened, we started doing some different things in my school, where we started doing what we called synergy. And we gave students projects, or project time rather, and they took those time periods and did their own projects. And we had this very simple rule. It was, do something that will change the world. And we let them decide what change meant and what the world meant. And the world could be very small or it could be very large. And here's why this is so powerful. Once we let go of the expectation of what they were supposed to learn, we took it out of their content area, we took it out of the standards that they were supposed to get, and we let them do their own projects. Their learning exploded. Because I'm a nerd, I did pay attention to the standards they passed off. And we had students that were passing off standards that were 2 to 5 grade levels above them, and some who passed off standards that were not even taught, things that you don't even teach K-12 students. These students were learning and showing that they were not just learning it, but they were proficient at it. And they were seeking that learning on their own rather than waiting for us to give it to them.
So why go there in the first place?
Why go to that project-based kind of thing?
Yeah, what led to that?
I had this experience with my daughter. 1, 2, skip a few. I'm a principal, and I'm like, how do I make every student have a unique learning experience that's tailored to them, that's focused where they are the ones that matter, not our standards, not the grades? And that's what we got to. And you know how when you use something like Gmail and it's free, it's cool that it's free and it doesn't cost anything, but Gmail's not the product. You're the product, right? You're the one that is being manipulated. You're the one that is being advertised to, and they're making money off of you using their product. Now, if you're cool with that, that's fine. But if you're not cool with that, then you're going to make other choices and you're going to choose different things to use so that you're not the product. And it's the same way in schools. I want students to be in charge of their learning from as soon as they can comprehend anything. I don't want them ever to feel like they're not the ones in control of their own learning, because truly, they're the only ones who care about their learning. We may talk like we care about their learning as educators, but that's a bunch of baloney also. We don't care about their learning. We care about them meeting our expectations and passing our tests and meeting our standards, but we do not care about their learning, because if we cared about their learning, we would change how we do school so that their learning is the focus and that it's easier for them to learn and harder for us to grade and assess what they're doing.
Absolutely. I could not agree more with that. But I'm also sitting here going, oh, I have so many Gmails and iCloud accounts. And oh, man. So I am just promoting and promoting. How did you, I want to come back to the synergy topic and how you really broke some barriers. How did you jump in and start to break those barriers and challenge that status quo?
Yeah, the first thing is I needed to go to a school where that was acceptable, because that's not acceptable everywhere. And one of the things that was in Fairbanks, Alaska, I went to that district so that I could do personalized learning. That's what they brought me there for. That's what I was there for. And let me tell you, we knocked it out of the park and it was incredible. It was a model of what personalizing learning looks like. And what does that mean? That means that every student essentially had their own personalized learning plan that was just for them, that maybe shared some similarities with others, but most importantly, they were in charge of their own learning. They were responsible for their learning. And we still had the traditional structures, because I didn't get to get rid of all of them, but I got rid of a lot of them. And being able to take that out of the content area, because I tried this in previous schools, and the challenge that I always ran into is if an English teacher has kids in her classroom in an English class, she's going to teach them English. If a math teacher has kids in a math class, she's going to teach them math. And what I had to do is I had to break teachers free of that constraint as well and say, this time is not for you to teach a specific subject. This time is for you to mentor and coach the kids. In fact, if you're preparing any kind of lesson, you're doing it wrong, because the students should be driving their own learning, not relying on you to do it for them.
And you're getting into high school redesign and Montessori based high school programming. And it doesn't just have to be high school, I guess I should say. This can be elementary, this can be junior high. The amount of mentorship needed in elementary is a little bit higher than the mentorship needed in high school, just because of brain development for these kids.
Actually, Tyler, I would say it's the opposite.
Really? Okay.
The mentorship is higher in high school because they've been trained to listen to the teacher's instructions and do what the teacher says. They've played the game of school long enough that you have to do a significant amount of untraining before they can actually learn how to learn again. So
Right.
in the younger grades, it looks different, but you don't need to continually say, yes, you can do this. Yes, you can do this. They already know they have permission. We suck that out of them as they get older in education.
And that's actually a true statement when you get to the brain plasticity of it. They haven't started to form those connections in their neurons yet. So it's a lot easier to start forming those new pathways. You speak so much about something that I'm actually trying to do in my own school, where we're trying to incorporate a land-based culture learning program in our junior high, moving away from the traditional math, English, science, social blocks, calling the whole afternoon just this is your land-based block. And here's the things we're going to be doing that you can choose to be exploring. And we're building our assessments around what they're choosing to explore. It's
Now, what do
re
you mean by land-based?
So my school has a live chicken coop where we built a chicken
Mm.
coop. We're looking after chickens. We have a bus getting donated to the school that we're converting into a greenhouse, putting some solar panels on top. We're in a very agriculture heavy center where we have a lot of farmers in our community that want kids to come out to the farm and see the land, see the tractors, see the equipment and how they do things. We in Alberta, we can offer green certificate programs that award high school credit towards graduation. We offer the poultry one, we'll be offering a greenhouse one, but we're looking to expand that to involve our community members with that. And then through all of these little programs we're offering, how can we also then connect it to their academic subjects without actually giving them that allotted time for that English or that math block, but still meeting the outcomes that are required to get them to graduate. So we're working towards that.
Which, Tyler, that is like the easiest thing in the world once you actually start going down that path. Because if here's how I think about it. If you follow the kid around, much like a Montessori program, you follow the child, you can note, hey, because here's the thing, kids don't care about the standards. They don't care about their grades. They
No,
know they're all made up. And if they didn't know that before the pandemic, they most certainly know that now because we just canceled everything when the pandemic hit because it didn't actually matter. And so they learned that lesson. And so if you just follow them around and you're like, oh, hey, look, that kid is reading ninth grade level material and they're only in sixth grade, I guess they understand it. Let me ask them a couple questions and see if they actually understand what they're reading. Oh, wow, look, they do. Hey, the topic that they're reading relates to social studies and relates to science. So we can check off those standards also. And look, they're doing this activity and it's requiring math. Looks like they understand algebra because they're actually doing the Pythagorean theorem in real life by building this chicken coop that has a right angle and a triangle in it. So I think they understand the Pythagorean theorem. So check, check, check.
yep. Then there's the little nuances, right? The quadratic equation in a -1 class. We have to sit and meet that outcome in some way, shape, or form. And so we can't necessarily go to our land-based program for that, but we're building towards it. I want to jump back though to your time in Fairbanks, Alaska. Alaska is beautiful. I
Yes, it
went there
is.
for Arctic Winter Games. I was in the Yukon as well. So the two neighbors, it's
Oh,
such a
cool.
beautiful place. Yeah. And within that though, you went there because that's what you were brought there for. And you got to start something. And in Transformative Principal, you talk about a 4-step process for school change. I'm hoping you can break down that process for us here so that we can understand how you went about initiating that.
Yeah. The first thing that's important to recognize is whether people are willing or not, you have to give them choice as well. And that includes the adults. And it's not just the kids, but it's the adults as well. So the 4-step process is quite simple. You need to have a clear vision. And I had a very clear vision about what we were going to do, which is we're going to do personalized learning. And what that means, and you don't have to have the correct definition. You need to have your definition of what this looks like. For me, what this meant was every student is going to have a personalized experience. What does that mean? That means that at the bare minimum, in every class, they're going to have one time per quarter an opportunity to choose how they're going to express their learning. And that's it. So my expectation was very low for teachers. It was do one personalized learning project in your class each quarter. That's it. And this is so important because we talk about having high expectations, and I think the opposite is better, that we have no expectations. Because even when we have high expectations, as soon as somebody reaches our expectations, they realize they've reached them and they don't need to continue. And so I essentially have no expectations. I don't care what you do. So it doesn't matter. And that has proven to be incredibly powerful for the students and the teachers that I've worked with. Because when I have an expectation, people are doing what I want. When they have their own expectation, they're going to exceed what I thought they could have done before, because we all have this natural creativity, this natural work ethic that we want to do. Even your punk kids who you think don't have a work ethic, trust me, they have a work ethic. You just got to find the right thing. So we have this vision. This is what we're going to do. We're going to personalize learning for our students. Then the second step is that we're going to communicate it and we're going to talk about it. And we're going to say that is the only thing that we care about. I don't care about anything else. Test scores, they don't matter. They're going to come or they're not going to come. That's not my goal. I'm not playing that game. I'm playing the game of we're going to personalize learning for our students. It's a different game. So test scores, they don't matter to me because I'm not playing that game. And we're going to talk about that all the time in my newsletters, in my parent meetings. That was what we brought up again and again and again. The next piece is empowerment of everybody, the faculty, the parents, the students. If a student has an idea, we're going to move towards that idea and we're going to let them run with it. We're not going to say, oh, you can't do that because that's not appropriate, or that's not safe, or that's not whatever. So get this. I had students who were like, Mr. Jones, we would like to learn bush skills, like living out in the wilderness in the bush of Alaska. And that means we're going to need to use knives. We're going to need to set traps. We're going to need to do all this stuff. I said, that's totally fine. Knives are pretty scary. How are you going to make sure that it's not scary? And they're like, here's how we're going to make sure that we're not using them inappropriately, that there's going to be supervision, all this kind of stuff. We're going to lock them up. We had knife issues at my school that year, but not by a single kid who was connected to the Bush Skills class, because they wanted to make sure that they were being safe. And in fact, the ones who knew and understood how to use knives were the ones who were saying, hey, this kid might have a knife. You better go check on this and make sure that everything's safe, because we know that he's not in this group with us and he's not learning the lessons that we're learning about being safe with it. So you better go check on that. And sure enough, they were right on. And those kids never had a problem with any weapons or fighting or anything, because they knew how close they were right to the edge. So you give people the power. You say, we're going to go down this path. We got you. We support you. And then the fourth piece is we are going to continually improve. And that's it. Like, how did that go? What can you do better next time? Let's keep improving. Let's keep improving. And when there's no expectations, people don't know when to stop improving. When there's expectations, they know they can stop when they reach whatever metric you've set. If the goal is 95% of students proficient, they're going to get 95% of students proficient, and then they're going to stop. Whether they say they are or not, that's what they're going to do because they met the goal. When you say our goal is personalized learning for every single student, they're not going to stop until every single student has a personalized plan, and they're going to keep going and going until every single student has that. That's why you play a different game than what we typically play in schools. So vision, communication, empowerment, and then continuous improvement, and then you just rinse and repeat. And if you do that and you are clear with what your vision is, then everybody can rise to the occasion. Even the people who don't want to do it, who are afraid of the change, who don't think it's a good idea, they still are going to be able to rise to that level because they're going to go at whatever pace they are comfortable with.
That is so amazing and reassuring and reaffirming and all these words to hear. The only thing is the statement of expectations is so contradictory in my head, because my favorite quote, one of my favorite quotes, is high expectations is an act of love, where low expectations is an act of apathy. But where I would twist that a little bit in your story is my expectation from what you're sharing is my expectation would be that people around us are considering the individualization process. And my expectation that's high for them would be always challenging them about how are you considering the individual. My expectation isn't about the grade score. My expectation isn't about what you're doing in terms of your planning and processing. It's what are you doing to individualize learning for your kids. So I love how you went about explaining that, because I'm sitting on this end going, what the heck? High expectations. That's my thing. I love high expectations, but we think about it just a little bit differently in terms of how they're being set.
Let me ask you this though. Your high expectations, do you think that I have low expectations about somebody's personal ethic of excellence?
Absolutely not.
No way.
Yeah.
My expectation is that you are going to be excellent in whatever it is that you're choosing to do. So if you're going to play video games, you better be putting in the work and do a good job of being an excellent video game player. We're not here to just play. We have an ethic of excellence.
Do your
That's
best.
part of it.
Yeah. Do your
Yes,
best.
be your best, whatever that is.
Yeah.
And your best is going to look different than the kid next to you and the girl over there. That's the key. The problem we have in education is that when we say high expectations, we say everybody has to do this thing in this way.
Oh God, we look at the standards and the grades.
That's right.
And that's high expectations to most people.
That's right. And that's not helpful. High expectations of having your own ethic of excellence is incredibly powerful.
There we go.
And feels so good. And kids love it when they get to be excellent.
Yeah.
And they hate it when they feel like a failure. And if they can't do the work that you're telling them to do in class, then they do feel like a failure. But if they're setting their work and they're setting their goals and they're setting their own ethic of excellence, they feel the power. And every time they overcome something, it is an exciting, amazing, awesome experience for them.
Absolutely. And you can see the fallout of that by just trying one thing in your classroom. And that's the next time that you go and give some kind of project. If you're not broken out of that traditional stream, just say, hey, I don't care how you submit this to me. Submit it the way that you can do it best and see what you get. And I guarantee you, if you're in a junior high or a high school, you're going to get the worst work you've ever gotten from the kids, because they're so used to being conformed to those expectations of you need to make your PowerPoint, you need to put this here, you need to write this essay this way and do this. But if you go to elementary kids and you say, I want you to tell me about the water cycle, and you can tell me any way that you want to tell me about it, you're going to get some really cool ways that kids show how they know about the water cycle. And why not play to their strengths?
And get this. So once kids have that permission to do things however they want, they're going to spend way more time, put way more energy into doing that thing than if they have to write. Like my daughter literally just yesterday texted me and said, Dad, how does this look? It's about half a page long. It's supposed to be a page long. I don't know how to make it any longer. And I'm like, who cares? Are you communicating what you need to communicate? That's what matters. It doesn't matter how long it is. Who cares about that? That's the dumbest, most arbitrary thing in the world.
And show me a standard that says it has to be a page.
Exactly.
Show me that. It's not there. It's not written there. It's not written there that if you're in a science class, it's not written there that you need to spell perfectly. It's not written there that you need to give me the essay. I am guilty. I teach high school chemistry, and I am guilty of giving tests, but I also partner every test and say, you guys have a choice where you can do my test, because you have to write diploma exams and we're conformed to the society we're in. And so the test helps you prepare for the diploma exam that you need to graduate to get into school. Or you can choose to do the project for me. The project is a lot more work. However, you can take it home. You can work on it how you want, when you want, where you want. And I'm about 50-50 split. I get some kids that want the test because it's actually a lot easier for them to do a test. It's the easy way out. They study, they write the test, they move on. But the kids that do the project, man, they're putting in 17, 20, one put in 30 hours of work to create this high production video for me just to tell me about stoichiometry. And I'm sitting here going, this is the coolest thing I've ever seen a kid do in stoichiometry. And stoichiometry is not really that exciting unless you're a big chemist. And so if you are, I'm sorry that I just offended you. That being said, it's that idea that you have to break that status quo. You have to break that barrier. And you talk about it in your vision, in your implementation of your first step process of your school changing. So within that, though, were you met with any resistance from staff, students, parents when you go in and try to do that?
Oh, yeah, tons. And what you have to do is you have to be clear on your vision. If the vision is clear and you know where you're going and you're committed to it, then it's all about how do I help you see how you fit into this? It's not about how do you do what I say you're going to do? How do you see yourself fitting into this bigger picture? How do you, eighth grade history teacher, how do you see yourself fitting into this personalizing learning? I don't know. I got a social studies textbook and this is the curriculum we got to hit. I don't know how it's going to work. Okay. Our vision is personalizing learning. So, what do you need to make it possible for you to personalize learning in social studies? I don't know. I suppose I could let them choose if they're going to do an essay or a PowerPoint or a video for whatever. Great. Thank you. Appreciate it. That's excellent. You
Is
do
it?
that?
Is it? I would sit there and
Yes.
say, why do you need to limit it to 3 things?
Oh, I don't care. Doesn't matter.
It's growth in that individual as an adult, actually, too. Yeah.
Exactly. So
Yeah.
you take the step you're comfortable taking, and you're going to find that you actually enjoy it more. And
Yep.
then you're going to want to do more. And I bring up that specific example because that is an exact conversation that I had with an eighth grade history teacher who was pushing back constantly. And I said, look, I don't have any expectation other than you personalize learning once per quarter for your students. That's it. Can you do that? Sure, I can do that. That's the requirement. Fine, I'll do it. Guess what? By the end of the year, she was doing the whole entire fourth quarter, was personalizing a ton of stuff
Yep.
for the kids.
And what's interesting about that too is you used the word let them do something they're comfortable in, but I bet you that teacher wasn't comfortable the first time they did it. And what they did was they took their box of comfort and they went out of it a little bit. And as a result, their box of comfort got bigger. And then they went out of it again, and their box of comfort got bigger. And then they went out of it again. And now, by that fourth quarter, where everything was personalized, they have this massive box of comfort of personalized learning.
And here's the key with this particular teacher is her box of comfort was accepting 3 different assignments, an essay, a PowerPoint, and a video. And that was a big step for her that first quarter. That was a big deal for her to say, you can have 3 different ways of showing that you understand this. That was a big deal. And she took a huge step. In fact, she took a bigger step than somebody else who had been doing this already and was already doing that kind of stuff. She took a bigger step than that person did because it was a much bigger ask of her to do that than it was to have this other guy do something that
Yes.
everybody else would have
Yep.
said he took the bigger step because he was doing more wild and crazy things.
Meeting people where they're at, right?
Yes,
That's exactly what it
absolutely.
is, meeting people where they're at.
And
So
that goes for students and teachers and parents.
yes. And
So
even coworkers, if you're a principal and you're working with other school principals, it's meeting them
yes,
where they're at too, because you're going to get pushback as that principal doing cool things from the other principals around you. Why are you doing it that way? How is that best for kids? What do you think about it?
yeah,
But one thing that you're talking about, and it's really resonating with me, this personalization, the individualization for kids. You mention this to teachers. You say, I just want you to do this. Did you share the why?
yeah, that's a huge part of it. And that story I told about my daughter, I've told that story probably 150 times at this point because it's a story that everybody can connect to
Mhm.
because it's easy because she has a disability to see she's different. But the reality is every kid is different. No matter who they are, no matter how gifted or disabled they may be, they are unique and individual. And everybody can get behind seeing them as unique and individual when we really put the pressure on. We don't treat them that way though. But the more we do, the better it is for everybody, for them, for us, for all of us.
That's so powerful. And what you're really doing is you're rooting yourself in that earth element that I like to talk about, that core value
Yeah.
and that value of the individual, the uniqueness of humanity. And that's a very big, broad, but powerful value to root yourself in. And it's so apparent how this initiative that you're taking, it's driven by that value that everyone's unique, everyone's different. And it makes the transition through implementing change so fluid because you root it back to that value, you root it back to that why, and you get the buy-in from the teachers because you say your flame and your risk doesn't have to be a bonfire. It can be a pilot light. It can be a starting point where people can start small, something that they've done before, not all the time, and see where it goes and just offer that multitude of options to people. So within that, though, you started implementing this. How long or what was the process like after you had the buy-in? Did it eventually roll over to a point where your community took over the individualization and they were the ones promoting, fostering it?
It got very close to that, but didn't get there quite yet. Pandemic came and messed it up. There was a bad situation at my school, and I had to be the fall guy and got pushed out. That was horribly professionally embarrassing. We didn't even talk about that. But those are real things that happen in schools, that these things do happen. What did definitely happen is that when the pandemic hit, our students were ready because they had already known how to learn. They already knew how to learn themselves, so they didn't need, the pressure was not as high for our students because they were prepared for it, and they already knew how to run their own learning, so it was not as challenging. That doesn't mean it was without challenges, that's for sure, but it was definitely a lot easier on our school because we were already doing so much that was personalized to them, that it was basically like, okay, now you just can't check in with me in person, we're going to check in via Zoom. That was really how the shift happened. The thing that's powerful, to go back to your question, is the teachers started owning things, and the teachers would come to me and say, we're going to do this. We're going to get our social studies, English, math, and science classes together, and we're going to do a project, all four of us together. So we need you to set up the schedule so that we have the same kids for a 4 block class. And I was like, the best I can do is 3 blocks because I can't get math in there with you, but I can get science, social studies, and English together.
Yeah.
And I was able to do that. And so they had these 3 classes working together, and then they would math decide to do something different. And they took their own approach and said, we're going to have all of the same classes during the same time with all skill levels. And then we're going to combine all the classes every day and then break them out where they need support so that we can teach the specific things that those kids need in a smaller group. So one teacher may have had 60 kids in her math class, but because of where they were at and what they were doing, that was totally fine so that the other teachers could have 5 to 15 kids in their classes. And the way the teachers sacrificed and gave up their way of doing things was really impressive and powerful.
And so, what did you notice after that shift occurred? We talked about the connection to the outcomes and we're individualized. What did you notice about how these outcomes were being reflected in learning? Were they going deeper? Was it the same level? Because there's articles out there too that say, you know what, direct instruction is needed to some extent. You have to have somebody present new information to people. However, you can counter argue with that, but they can go and explore and find that information if you just help them with the tools on how to research and find it. Did you notice an improvement when you switched to this model?
Yes, absolutely. We noticed an improvement in behavior, in on task behavior. We noticed an improvement in attitude. We noticed a decrease in fighting and disrespect towards teachers. All those things were true. And then we also saw kids, like I said before, scoring at an even higher level on their standards and passing off standards that were above grade level. And our district wasn't set up to be able to give them quote unquote credit for that higher grade level stuff beyond our middle school. But when a 6th grader passed off something that was an 8th grade standard, we gave them credit for that and said, look, you learned this, you've shown it, and we know that you get it. And so we had kids taking more initiative, taking more charge of their own learning, more charge of their time. We had parents saying, my kids come home and talk to me about school, and they haven't talked to me about school in years. And those were the things that really told us this is working and this is working well, because kids were talking to their parents. Like,
That's a
that's
big
huge.
telltale. Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely.
A middle school kid telling their parents what they did at school that day without being prompted. Holy mackerel. That is
Right.
crazy.
You know what? I get kids that talk to their parents all the time. Usually it's for the weird things. I'm sitting here going, okay, I teach a grade 9 science class and we do a genetics thing. And so I run this little lab where I give them candies and they pull out the genetic traits. I call it my baby making lab. And I tell the kids that when you come tomorrow, we're going to make some babies and make sure you pick the right partner. So they sure as heck go home and
Yeah.
they tell their parents, oh my God, you won't believe what he said.
Yeah.
He said that we're going to make babies tomorrow and I have to find the right partner. So it's cool to get the excitement when you really engage them that way, right? And
Yeah.
get to break it down. So with that, you also talked about continuous improvement. And on your Synergy podcast for this section, you mentioned the quote that nothing is ever good enough and continuous improvement is crucial. How do you balance the need for that constant growth and improvement with ensuring stability and consistency, though, in your educational environment?
We don't really need that consistency in our educational environment. We think we do, but we don't. Let's just keep on making it better is totally acceptable. And once you say this is what we're doing, let me put it this way. So we had a middle school, 7th and 8th grade at first, and then it switched to 6th or 8th grade, but 7th and 8th grade. And the second year, my counselor went down to talk to the incoming 7th graders, and she said, we usually do it like this, but with you, we're going to do it like this. And I was like, whoa, hold on, sister. Don't say that. Because when you say that, these kids don't know. But every year, because we were just 7th and 8th, we had a military base next door. So we were getting 66% of our students were brand new to the school and didn't know anything. They didn't know what the school was about. They didn't know what the experience was going to be. Some who lived there may have had siblings who went through the school before, so they had an idea. But those were all negative perceptions, that it was a tough school, that the kids were punks, that there were a lot of fights. All those things had changed anyway. And so instead of saying this is how it used to be and now you're going to do it like this, the kids don't need to know that. They just need to know that however we do it is how we do it. And next year we may do it differently and only a third of them are still going to be here. So I think it's going to be all right. We're going to make it out just fine. And so that consistency of what does the programming look like, that's where it goes back to communication. This is our vision. This is how we're going to get there. This is what we're going to do this year to get there. And we could lay it out and say, this is what the change is going to look like. And that becomes really powerful for the families to say, oh, the school is actually working on making things better for my individual student. That's powerful. And they don't need consistency when you're really focused on their own kids.
And the only consistent thing in our lives is change is the constant. It's what's always going to happen. I've always wanted to conduct a little experiment and see where it goes. I've wanted to go into a preschool room and tell the preschool teacher, I don't want you putting nameplates on any of the desks. Let them sit where they want. They don't even need desks. Let's go flexible seating. We can call it that. Let them go where they want. Let's do that in preschool. Let's do that in kindergarten, grade 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, all the way through. And I would love to see how kids in junior high and high school that have had flexible seating all the way through respond to change, creativity, innovation versus kids that have had even just the simple structure of this is your assigned seat, right? Because we talk about consistency, and the reason we have kids in grade 4 that lose their mind when their assigned seats changed, or when they don't know where they're supposed to be, or their name tag broke on their desk because they had it in grade 3, because they had it in grade 2, because they had it in grade 1. There was consistency in where they sat, how they sat, and what it looked like. But again, we come back to you could have shaped that brain way before you even got to assigned seating. So when we talk continuous improvement, for me, that balance with consistency in an education environment is consistency in change. We need to make sure that our people are supporting each other, but recognize that we move with the times, we move with updates, we move with advancements in technology. We're going to change.
And the consistency is there for the ease of the adults. It's not there for the ease of the kids because they change each year. And the consistency is so that it's easier for the adults. And schools are designed for adults. They are not designed for kids. If they were designed for kids, they'd look a lot different, but they're designed for adults to make it easy for us. All of our systems, all of our structures, those are all designed for the adults to make it easy for them. Once we let go of that and we say, what does this need to look like for the kids? Then we're going to find how we can change it and make it better. One of the things we did, two things real quick. Number one, We had 4 or 5 different options for seating in every single class. We had a ball, we had squishy seats, we had regular seats, we had a desk, a bike desk is what it's called. Couldn't think of it for a minute. And then we had a standing desk. Those were options for all of our students. Everybody had that opportunity. They could choose which of those they wanted to do. Then in our math classroom, I talked about how we had all the math students come together. We put the math teachers all around this one big room that had dividers that you could, curtains that you could pull to separate the classrooms. And we said, this is your space and you can use it however you need to. Some days they were all in there in one big group. Other days there was one aide in the big group, kids doing individual work, and all the teachers were in their classrooms with small groups. Sometimes the teachers were in there with small groups while the big group was in a classroom by themselves with an adult. There's always an adult there. But having that flexible space, we said you can do this however you need to and make it work for the kids, not just work for the adults, but work for the kids. And that approach gave those teachers great flexibility and reduced discipline problems and improved learning. And you could see it in how the kids reacted every single day. It was incredibly powerful.
One of the things that I often fall back on when I'm talking with my teachers, my support staff, my parents is whose agenda are we pushing? Are we trying to push our own agenda and our own expectations of what we have for everyone? Or are we considering the agenda of the kid and what they want to do and where they're at and where they want to go with it? There's so much power in that. With this big synergistic movement, you shared a little bit about this initiative you brought into Alaska and how you pushed it. Would you say that's your most memorable project to come out of Synergy, or do you have some others that you'd like to share as well?
Yeah, there's a ton. And if you search for synergy on transformativeprincipal.org, you can listen to a bunch of examples of kids talking about what they were doing, which is so cool. But the one that I do want to highlight is there are a couple, and I'll highlight them briefly. Number one, a student wanted to create a social network that would make it so that kids could not bully each other. This was really important to her because she didn't think that bullying was cool and kids were on social media and she thought that just led to them bullying each other. And she was like, I want to make social media for our school where our kids can't bully each other. Now, did she accomplish that? No, she didn't even come close. She was so far away from being
Yep.
successful. It was laughable. That doesn't matter though, because she learned a lot of cool things. She grew and developed in ways that were appropriate for her. And she realized how difficult that was and eventually couldn't complete it by the time school was out. But let me tell you, I don't know where she is now, but I hope that someday she'll reach out to me and say, this is what I've done with my life, because I know she's going to do something amazing.
And that actually brings so much understanding to them too, because in her taking on that task, she realizes how hard it is for everyone to solve as well, right? Because it is such a hard problem to solve. Okay, I cut you off. You shared one. I want to get a couple here.
Okay,
Though.
so here's a couple more. I had a group of boys who would go every, I don't know, every 2 or 3 weeks. They would totally change what they were focusing on. These boys did not accomplish anything. And my librarian said it best. She said, I tell you, these boys sure are not accomplishing much, but they sure are learning a lot. And by switching every couple of weeks, they would go into an area, be excited about it, and then realize it was hard, and then they would back out and go do something else. That is not a bad thing. A lot of people criticized it and said they haven't accomplished anything. And I'm like, it's not about the accomplishment. It's about, and because we were paying attention, we knew they were still learning the things that we needed them to learn. So it was totally worthwhile. The third and final group that I'll talk about was this group of girls who wanted to teach cheer, soccer, and volleyball to second grade girls who were at the school next door that they would have to go out and get and bring over to our school in 30 and 40 below zero weather. Like, this is a big deal. And they did it. They figured out how to do it in a safe way, in an appropriate way, make sure the kids were safe, had no injuries during that whole time. They did a better job than our PE department did of keeping kids safe. Just saying, that was pretty amazing. They communicated with the principal to make sure the principal understood what they were trying to do. Then they realized this would be good if there were boys involved. So we want to bring boys over too, and we want to have boys coach the boys. So they started doing that, and they brought these other boys on. And then they came to me and said, Mr. Jones, how do we fire people? What? 7th and 8th grade girls asking, how do we fire people?
Oh
And
boy.
keep the humanity in it so that we don't make them feel like they're terrible.
Yeah.
This just isn't working. Has an adult ever asked that question?
Yeah.
Seriously. So that's a skill that they learned and thought about and had to be exposed to, that some adults never even have the opportunity to have that experience. And these girls rocked it, and they were amazing. They did an amazing job with the little kids. They did an amazing job telling these boys it's not working out and we need to part ways, but you're still valuable and you're going to go on and do something else that's great, but this is not it. And man, if we could have bosses do that to their employees, the world would be a better place. And they didn't wait 6 months of poor behavior and work to say that. They did it within just 2 weeks, and they're like, hey, this isn't working. We already know it's not working. We need to cut it off. That was incredibly powerful.
Thank you for sharing. Those are amazing stories. So, you have this big bucket of inspiration for yourself. And along the way, I'm sure there's ups, there's downs, there's highs, there's lows. What have you turned to in your journey to keep yourself aligned to this?
The thing that's funny is I can't help but be aligned to it. It goes back to that value. So the way that I see it is that every single person is a child of God. And when I see them as children of God, to me, that means something. Now, I don't care if you don't agree with my religious or spiritual beliefs, that doesn't matter to me. That's how I see them. And because I see them that way, I believe that they deserve my respect, they deserve my full effort, and they deserve to be given the opportunity to grow in the best way possible for them. That is a deeply held value for me that I cannot turn away from. It's impossible to. And so I have to continue in that direction. So even when it's hard, even when kids are going crazy and doing stupid things and getting me and everybody else in trouble because of their actions, I still have to respect that they are children of God, and I'm going to serve them to the best of my ability, because that is what I believe is important for me to do.
Thank you so much for sharing. With that, for anybody that is listening to this, what advice would you give people listening moving forward on how to consider that individualistic approach?
Start with yourself. So what I love about you, Tyler, is you're doing this podcast and you're trying to develop and grow your own learning. I think everybody should have a podcast, not so that everybody can be like Joe Rogan, but so that everybody can have an opportunity to guide and be in control of their own learning. I call this learning in dog years, because you're asking these questions of people who are experts, you're going to learn so much faster than other people. And what doesn't matter is courses that you could take in college, your doctorate, all those things are not nearly as important, because those are standardized approaches to what people need to learn. But what you need to learn is personal to you. So take control of your own personal learning, because nobody else cares about it but you.
And it's the lived experiences that make somebody so good at what they end up becoming. The master's, the doctorate, all the education, the postdoctorate, that's the validation that we need, the legitimacy, the professionalism that sometimes you need to attain certain roles in a society. But to go out and do your own thing, you're only successful if you have that lived experience. Jethro, I want to thank you so much for giving me your time today and connecting and sharing your stories. It means so much to me. I know it means so much to people listening to this. For people that want to reach out to you and get a hold of you, what's the best way for them to go about connecting?
I'm at Jethro Jones pretty much everywhere. JethroJones.com, at Jethro Jones on all the socials. I would love to chat with anybody who's interested. Transformative Principal is the name of my podcast, one of them. And yeah, just reach out. Would love to chat with anybody. I love talking about this stuff. I'm so nerdy about it.
This has been so much fun for me too. I sit here and I've got a 40-minute drive home and I'm going to be buzzing. I'm going to be like, that was incredible. I loved everything that we just did. Hey, this was so much fun.
Thank you.
You've been listening to the Elemental Educator. Our aim is to illuminate optimal educational practices on a global scale. And second, we want to shine a light on the expertise and knowledge that Tyler brings to educational institutions. He's not just a talking head. He's a practicing educator, a school principal, armed with a master's in educational administration, and on the brink of completing his doctorate. We hope you've enjoyed the show. Make sure to like, rate, review, and subscribe. We'll be back soon, but in the meantime, find us on Instagram, Facebook, and X at Elemental Educator. And to contact us, fire off an email. See what I did there? Fire off. Okay. Send an email to elementaleducator@gmail.com. See you next time on the Elemental Educator.